The Dark Mind Detective podcast is proud to announce a partnership with West Point Investigations because they didn't just provide a service for me, they saved me. You see, last month there was no podcast. It wasn't because I was tired or uninspired. Behind the scenes, something was growing, metastasizing like a cancer. A crisis so vicious and cruel, I'd rate it at a 10 out of 10 on a danger scale. It wasn't just about me. It was threatening my dignity, my livelihood, and most importantly, my children. I survived a lot in life. Spinal injuries, the brutal death of my spouse, financial ruin, betrayal. I rebuilt myself more times than I can ever count, but this was different. This was a new level of deceit and dishonesty, and the worst part, it was all a lie. Carefully fabricated, calculated, malicious lie designed to destroy me. I was waking up at 2, 3 in the morning, drenched in sweat, heart pounding, panic attacks ripping through me. As someone with post-traumatic stress from taking my wife off life support, I can tell you this was one of the most triggering and terrifying moments of my life. If this lie had succeeded, it would have shut down my podcast, wrecked 6 years of work, severed me from my children, left me humiliated and broken. And the person who told it still clings to it, even after it's been exposed. At the final hour, when I thought wolves were practically at my door, I reached out for help when I found Jolene Johnson, a private investigator with West Point Investigations. Jolene did what no one else could. She exposed the truth, undeniable, inarguable truth. She dismantled the lies piece by piece, and in doing so, she pulled me and my children back from the brink. Without her, I might still be in the fire. Without her, I might not even be speaking to you, or you listening to me right now. Jolene gave me back my dignity, my peace, my breath in a world where so many takes. She gave, and that's why I'm proud to announce West Point Investigation is now official partner of the Dark Mind Detective. Jolene will be joining me for a monthly segment on investigation work, safety, real-life crisis, and breakdown. And she's also licensed in British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario. And I say this to you, the listeners, if you are facing a crisis, if you're surrounded by manipulation, if the facts don't add up, don't wait. Find out the truth, because your life might depend on it. Visit www.westpointinvestigations.ca. If Jolene could save me from this, I can only imagine what she could do for you. To Jolene, thank you. To my listeners, stay safe, stay sharp, and never stop seeking the truth. This episode contains extremely unsettling and disturbing subject matter. While I avoid sensationalism and refrain from overly graphic details, the events discussed involved violence, exploitation, and the loss of life. I present these facts with the utmost care, balancing the need to uncover the truth with deep respect for the surviving family members and the loved ones of those affected. At any moment, if this material becomes overwhelming, please take a break. Think about your mental health. Because I can tell you something. Researching this material over the year and a half, I've had to take many breaks from this horror and this story that I call Picktonland. Thank you for listening, The Dark Mind Detective. Picktonland is not just a place. It's a hidden world within our own, a shadow realm where the rules of law, morality, and human decency are abandoned. It is an ecosystem where the criminal enterprises flourished unchecked, where the weak are fed to the insatiable appetite of the deprived. In Picktonland, predators roam freely, engaging in blood sports, pit bull fighting, rooster fights, and every unspeakable act of cruelty, while corrupt figures look the other way, or worse, indulge in the horrors themselves. It is a sanctuary for monsters. It is a place where the system has failed so completely that murder is just another transaction, where addiction fuels an economy of suffering, and where even the most heinous acts are swallowed up by the mud, never to resurface. Picktonland is not just a pig farm. It is not just the downtown east side. It's a world that exists whenever society stops caring, and when those in power allow suffering to turn a profit, and when the most vulnerable becomes invisible. This is the first episode of Picktonland. And before we begin, I need to set the tone, because this isn't just another true crime podcast. This is a highly charged and deeply disturbing case. It is one of the most difficult investigations I've ever taken on. The work you're about to hear has taken a toll on me, mentally, emotionally, and even physically. There was moments when I regret going down this path, but I stayed strong with it because I believe the story is too important to tell. I was born and raised in Vancouver, BC. I remember when the case first broke. The headlines about heads in freezers, whispers about snuff movies, human remains mixed in with meat packages, the surviving sex workers who were too scared to go on record spoken about deprived sex games, including sexual assault and torture and being drugged, powerful hallucinogenic drugs. Diana Rock, one of Pickton's victims, before she was murdered on that farm, testified about being held in a blacked out room for 3 days, beaten and gang raped for 3 days by multiple men. This is a story beyond horrific. And as a father to a daughter, this is my worst realized nightmare researching this case, that there are those who partook in these most despicable events, whose names we've never learnt, and people who know and keep quiet about what was done on that most vile property, that realm I call Picktonland. In 2002, the city was gripped by rumors. Media went haywire across the world. Tabloid headlines. News outlets from around the world. Vancouver was now on the map, not for Expo 86, not for the Olympics, not for World Cup soccer, but for having one of the worst murder atrocity, a killing field, a slaughterhouse, a real horror movie set in plain sight that was allowed to carry on for decades and decades and decades. Then the published ban dropped like a black curtain. For years, the public was kept in the dark. And then the trial. Then came the trial. 6 counts of second-degree murder. Not the full scope, not even close. No mention of the 40 male DNA profiles found on that property. No attempt to identify them. No co-conspirator's name. No accountability for the authorities who failed over and over. And every time Robert Pickton got in trouble, leading up to all this stuff, files disappeared. In 1990, he was a suspect. In a rape case, files destroyed. In 1997, nearly killed a woman in a very brutal, vicious knife fight. Charges stayed, even though he handcuffed her and they had to get the key out of the handcuff. out of his pocket in the emergency room. Charges staged. He wasn't a reliable enough witness. All the files were destroyed from that case. Robert Pickton seemed to have a guardian angel. Once is a mistake. Twice is a pattern. 3 times, 4 times, 5 times? Gee, what do you think, dear listeners? It happened multiple times. Everything is rotten when it comes to this case. This project represents thousands of hours of research, collaborations from ex-cops, forensic experts, victims' family members, key witness. I built a forensic mosaic from the cases, from court files, RCMP records, DNA evidence, and testimony. My focus is on the truth, without exploiting anyone's grief. I'll never cold call families, but if they want to speak on or off the record, my door is always open. This case is one of the largest criminal investigations in human history, and one of the most expertly minimalized. The RCMP hold over 2 million pages of documents, but only 200,000 have been released. Where's the rest? Either sealed or destroyed. The forensic evidence is staggering. 40 unidentified male DNA profiles, 40 female DNA profiles with no names attached. That's 80 lives. And that's what we just know. So just for you, the listener, to understand, they identified 33 DNA profiles of women that they could name. But there was another 40 on top of it that they haven't. But yet, 100 pages of articles that have been written by Robert Pickton in the mainstream news over the last decades, and every single one of them, they only parrot, oh, he was charged for 6 counts, second degree, and those 20 others were stayed. You know, kind of an interesting parlor game, because when you add up all the different DNA profiles, there was a massive amount of people that have never been named that are connected to that farm, both male and female. Just think about that for a moment. This is expert stagecraft. This is 3-card Monty. Look the other way, pick a card, if you get what I'm saying, right? 100 pages of links to news articles, with each one doing a recap. Robert Pickton, 6 counts of second-degree murder. That doesn't sound so bad right now, right? There's been worse serial killers and worse than that. According to high-level organized crime sources I've spoken with, these crimes or versions of it still happen today. Maybe not on the same scale as Pickton's farm, but still vulnerable women are being lured to rural properties and targeted by predators. After all the promises made during the missing women's inquiry, things were supposed to change. They didn't. In fact, my opinions, things are worse now. BC has become a haven for predators, gangs, traffickers. Drugs flow in and out with ease. The downtown east side remains an open hunting ground for the worst kind of men. In this 20-part series, I'm going to take you inside this case from every angle I can, without burning my sanity to the ground. My goal is simple, is to give you depth, context, truth, not a PR polished version, not the media soundbites, the real story built from the evidence. And if any of you have any information, my door is always open. Welcome to Picktonland. This isn't just about Robert Pickton. This is about systemic failures that was allowed horror to unfold for decades. And here's what doesn't add up. a slaughterhouse turned crime scene littered with male DNA, including on victims' remains. A killer tied to disappearances and murder since the 1980s, yet framed as a lonely pig farmer who only faced justice because of a tip about a submachine gun in his possession. In reality, they find a dildo attached to a .22 caliber handgun because reality is stranger than fiction. The narrative that downplays the sheer scale of complicity and neglect. This case isn't a true crime story. It's a cultural nightmare tapped into ancient fears of ghouls and graveyard desecrators, of predators or predators who exploit the most vulnerable. These women didn't just die. They were failed by society long before Pickton. And if we don't confront the unanswered questions, like who else was involved? This series is dedicated to people who are unable to speak for themselves, for those who slip through the cracks, anyone who has ever feared for their loved ones who might be next. Because monsters don't just hide in the shadow, they operate in plain sight. The only way to stop them is to shine a light. Like I said in the beginning, I was born and raised in Vancouver. I spent time in foster care, and so I've seen firsthand how brutal the system can be. I'm a mixed race person, mixed with white, black, and indigenous, and through my children's mother, my kids are indigenous. My goal is to expose what has been buried. My story begins at 953 Dominion Road. What remains today is just a fenced-in empty field, a patch of grass surrounded by a chain link's perimeter. If you drove past, you might not even slow down. You might not even guess that that was the site of one of the worst massacres in Canadian history. There's no plaque, there's no signage, there's no memorial, nothing, just silence. But the silence speaks volumes. It echoes louder than it screams. What disturbs me the most wasn't what I saw, it's what I didn't see. A place that has been memory holed, erased, scrubbed clean like it never happened. As a society collectively whispered, "Move along, nothing to see here." In February 2004, I was honored to do a candlelight vigil with the Indigenous community. And when I came to that field, I was shocked how scrubbed clean it was. Like nothing to see here. Move along. But imagine if it was your sister, your daughter, your mother, whose final moments happened on that very soil, who vanished into that pit of land and never came home. And imagine a society covering it with grass and pretending her bones, her story, her pain never existed. That isn't just forgetting, it's erasing. That's complicity. When I visited the site for a candlelight vigil hosted by the members of the Indigenous community, I was struck not just by the absence of a memorial, but also the absence of solidarity. No one from the local community came in any official capacity. No neighbors, no officials, just a few family members holding on to the memory like it was the last fragile thread tying their loved ones to this world. The media showed up because it was newsworthy. Pickton was on parole. There was a fresh headline. But once the cameras turned off, so did the world's attention. And what was left? that cold. And soon as the ceremony was over, someone watching came and threw away all the posters, all the flowers, all the candles. Sanitized and gone again, nothing to see here, just like that field, just like the history. And just like everything about this case, a feeling of anger and disgust by the people's attitudes. I remember, too, when I stood there, I felt the air press heavy. I swear, if you really listen quietly, you could almost hear them, the victims, whispering through the soil. The silence wasn't empty, it was haunted, it was active. A bureaucratic kind of silent treatment, like the land itself has been gagged. The gagging wasn't passive, it was deliberate. We have another word for that: evil. There's a myth that evil always screams. It's not loud and monstrous and obvious. It is like some of the darkest evil whispers, or worse, say nothing at all, let things slide, allow injustice through its silence. Which raises a question: is silence any less cruel than the crimes itself? If saying nothing somehow is less brutal than saying the most hateful, vile things. Because here's what I know: there is violence in words, but there's also violence in the decision not to speak. And that violence continues when the land is erased, when history is covered over, and voices are muted. And you want to know another layer of cruelty? Look at the irony of development in British Columbia, in the province where developers are gods. Land is everything. And owning that land is big, big money for the developers. Everything sacred or historic is bulldozed to make room for a cookie-cutter townhomes or strip malls. Land is never just land, it's currency. The property at 953 Dominion Road is prime real estate. The land made Picktons wealthy enough to buy the best lawyers, wealthy enough to stall justice for years. The same land that saw the murder of women's societies already failed. It was also the land that protected the killers. That's the kind of evil that doesn't wear a face. That's systemic. That's institutional. That's intergenerational. If you were an Indigenous woman who lost her sister there and lit a candle there and begged for a public reckoning only to have the vigil wiped out by morning, how do you even begin to defy that pain? To kill someone is evil. To cover up the killing. To cover up that killing is equally evil. To profit off the land where it happened. To erase the memory of the people who suffered. What do we call that? Because of that sanitized patch of grass doesn't just scream, nothing to see here. It screams into the silence itself, daring you to hear the whispers of the dead, daring you to feel what happened there. And maybe the most terrifying of all, it dares you to realize that if enough people look away, even a mass grave can be turned into a markable square footage. So again, I ask, what is evil? If it's just the monster who acted alone, or is it the city that looked away, a system that enables it, a society that enables it, the silence that continues? Because if this is justice, if this is a memory, if this is healing, we have a long way to go. Nothing to see here, right? And then, just like clockwork, again came the final insult. I remember standing on the edge of the Pickton farm. From a distance, it looked so ordinary, just an empty field, the chain-link fence, squeezed between big box stores, cookie-cutter townhomes. The kind of place you'd walk past without a second glance. The moment my foot touched the soil, I came in contact. Something cold and ancient crawled up my spine. The air felt different there, heavier, though it carried the memories of the cleanup crews I couldn't erase. Have you ever walked into a room and known, without being told, that something terrible happened there? That's what it was like. The ground beneath my feet seemed to pulse with buried secrets, whispering things that no official reports could ever capture. It was too clean, you understand, too normal, like a crime scene wiped of its fingerprints, still there, reeking of bleach. The silence was deafening. With my eyes, I saw versus what every primal instinct was screaming. And this is what this series explores. The overlooked corners, the connections, often dismissed, the whispers between the lines of the court transcripts. I'm not just telling you what happened on that farm. I'm taking you with me into the darkness, into the place where conventional true crime narratives fear to tread. Because sometimes the most terrifying truths aren't found in the evidence collected, but the evidence ignored. What this series explores is the overlooked corners, the connections often dismissed, the whispers between the lines of the court transcripts. I'm not telling you what happened on that farm. I'm taking you with me into the darkness, because sometimes the most terrifying truths aren't found in the evidence collected, but in the evidence ignored. Sometimes the real monsters aren't the ones behind bars, but the system that allowed them to hunt for so long. Listen closely. The truth is speaking. Can you hear it? Researching this Robert Pickton case has been one of the most challenging endeavors I've ever undertaken, not just because of the sheer scale of the horror and the number of victims, but because of the overwhelming amount of misleading and repetitious information clouding the truth. I've shifted to thousands of articles, most with the same tired formula, brief recap, a few surface level details, and then a rehash of the same basic facts. 6 months of my life disappeared into this labyrinth of recycled narratives, researching daily through hundreds of articles for that one critical piece of information, only to find the same story regurgitated endlessly, while some exceptional journalists broke ground early, asking hard questions, giving voice to the victims, but the majority served as an echo chamber. They buried a minor update within the articles, deep within the text, then pad the rest with the same worn summary. After a while, you begin to recognize the pattern, the manipulation, almost hypnotic, how certain facts are emphasized and the others vanish into obscurity. Consider the male DNA found on body parts throughout the properties. How many articles even mention this? Almost none. Or the human meat discovered in Pickton's freezer, a detail rarely discussed in mainstream coverage. Or what about Pat Casanova, Pickton's right-hand man? They prowled Vancouver's downtown east side together, hunting for women. Associates brought sex workers to them, even joke having to bring more than 2 at a time for Pat Casanova, and these same women later ended up dismembered and stored in the same freezers where Pickton and Pat Casanova butchered pig meat. This wasn't a lone wolf operation. This was a massive murder on an industrial scale. In the next episode, in 1997, the attempted murder case involving Robert Pickton and Miss Anderson, detailing a violent struggle on Pickton's property and Miss Anderson's harrowing escape. It highlights the critical evidence gathered, such as a handcuff key linking Pickton to the assault, but it also examines a missed opportunity of the initial investigation. And we discussed the Crown's controversial detail to stay the charges against Pickton, citing concerns about Miss Anderson's reliability due to her drug addiction and the subsequent discovery of DNA from other missing women, previously untested evidence. Underscores how many missteps potentially allowed Pickton to continue his crimes. Thank you for listening. The Dark Mind Detective. Truth. West Point Investigation is a proud partner with the Dark Mind Detective podcast. Jolene brings years of experience, discretion, and precision to every case. West Point Investigation specializes in surveillance, background checks, fraud, investigations, and high-stakes personal disputes. Jolene brings years of experience, discretion, and precision to every case. You can learn more or book a confidential consultation at www.westpointinvestigation.ca. That's your first step towards finding the truth before lies find you. So if your reputation, your family, or your freedom is on the line, don't wait, because Jolene is licensed in British Columbia, Alberta, and Ontario, and she knows exactly how to track down the evidence that matters most. Thank you very much, the Dark Mind Detective.